I stood before him, and the heavy silence of the afterlife was shattered by a single terrifyingly beautiful voice that vibrated in my very marrow. Jesus didn't look like a church painting. He looked like my people, bronze-skinned and authoritative, and he was pointing directly at a massive fig tree that seemed to pulse with a light of its own. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Howard, learn the lesson of the tree. When the branch becomes tender and puts out leaves, you know that summer is near. But look closer, for the harvest has already begun." In that moment, the tree transformed into a glowing map of Israel right before my eyes. And I realized with a shock that my generation isn't just watching history. We are the biological ticking clock of a divine appointment that is about to expire for the entire world. For you to grasp the absolute weight of that vision, you need to know that I am the last person on earth who should be telling you this. My name is Howard Abrams. I'm 83 years old, and I spent my entire life as a practical, hard-headed textile businessman in St. Louis. As the former president of the B'nai Amunah Synagogue and a leader who organized countless trips to the Holy Land, I viewed God as a historical heritage, not a living conversation. I certainly didn't believe in the supernatural or the afterlife, but all my skepticism vanished the moment my heart stopped during a bridge game at the club. I was clinically dead for exactly 20 minutes, a code blue that the paramedics had already given up on, and while my body lay cold, my soul was being shown the literal blueprints of the end. What Jesus revealed to me during those 20 minutes was a sequence of 5 specific geopolitical events that are unfolding right now exactly as the ancient scrolls predicted. From the literal drying of the Euphrates River by modern Turkish dams to the shocking reason why every person watching this will soon see 2 prophets in Jerusalem through the smartphone in their hand, the pieces are finally in place. I'm sharing this because the fullness of the Gentiles is almost reached and the veil is about to be lifted forever. Before I tell you about the riverbed that is turning to dust as we speak, I want to ask you a question. Do you feel the strange urgency in the world right now? Please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe and turn on notifications to hear these 5 warnings Jesus gave me. The ticking clock Jesus showed me only makes sense once you know the man I was. For 60 years, I viewed the world through a ledger and high thread count fabric. As a textile executive and president of B'nai Amunah in St. Louis, my reality was built on things I could touch, measure, and sell. I wasn't a man of visions. I was the practical skeptic who organized birthright trips. To me, Israel was a matter of history and heritage, not a stage for supernatural intervention. I believed ancient prophecies were just beautiful poetry, not literal blueprints for the news. That Tuesday afternoon, I felt as permanent as the stones of Jerusalem, never suspecting my life was about to be shredded. We were sitting in the corner booth at the Jewish club, the air thick with the smell of rye bread and the aggressive banter of a bridge game I'd played for decades. I was holding a decent hand, leaning forward to challenge a bid, when a white-hot blade suddenly slashed through my abdomen. It wasn't just pain, it was a total structural failure. My vision tunneled into a tiny dot, and the laughter of my friends warped into a low, metallic roar. I felt my chair tip backward, but the sensation of falling never ended. I heard the frantic scrape of furniture and my friend Bernie, a retired cardiologist, screaming for help. My lungs turned to stone. Then the strangest thing happened. The pain simply evaporated, replaced by a clarity that was terrifying in its sharpness. I wasn't on the floor anymore. I was hovering near the ceiling, looking down at a scene that felt like a movie I wasn't supposed to watch. I saw Bernie frantically pumping on the chest of an old man who looked like me, but gray and discarded. I watched the paramedics burst through the doors 6 minutes later, their faces set in that grim mask they wear for losing battles. They worked on me with a rhythmic, desperate violence, shocks, needles, shouted numbers, but the monitor stayed flat. For 20 minutes I was a code blue, a clinical corpse. The walls of the club began to dissolve into a heavy velvet silence that swallowed the sirens and the shouting. I felt a magnetic pull, a force that wasn't aggressive but was absolutely irresistible, drawing me away from the only world I had ever known. The hospital lights faded into a darkness that wasn't empty but felt pregnant with a weight I couldn't describe. I was moving at a speed that defied physics, toward a horizon that lacked a sun yet radiated a glow more intense than the noon heat of the Negev desert. My businessman's mind tried to find a logical explanation for my death, but the skeptic was gone. I was crossing a border that no passport could authorize. The transition from that heavy velvet silence happened faster than a camera flash. 1 second I was being pulled through a darkness that felt like a physical weight, and the next I was standing in a place where the air itself seemed to be made of liquid gold. It wasn't just light, it was a presence that had a temperature, a warmth that soaked into my skin and erased 83 years of aches and the crushing cold of death. This light didn't hurt my eyes like the harsh Missouri sun. It was soft and alive, as if every atom was vibrating with a peace I'd never known. I realized I was finally in a place more real than the world I'd left behind. He was just there, standing right in front of me. As a Jewish man who spent his life in the synagogue, I expected to see ancestors, but the man before me shattered every icon I'd ever seen. He didn't have the pale skin or blue eyes of the church paintings. His skin was the color of deep bronze, weathered by a sun I recognized from my trips to Galilee. His eyes were dark, piercing, and held a beautiful, terrifying authority that made my legs simply give out. I couldn't speak, and I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down my face. My very DNA recognized him before my mind could even process who he was. It was the Messiah. "Howard," he said, and my name didn't come through my ears. It resonated in the very marrow of my bones. He reached out a hand that bore a jagged silver scar, a mark of a sacrifice I'd spent 80 years ignoring, and helped me up. His touch felt like an electric current of pure love, but his expression was grave. "I have kept my promise to your fathers," he told me, his voice like low thunder. "Now I have things to show you that your children must know." He explained I was there for a reason, to see the secrets of the end unfolding right now. I knew then that what he was about to reveal would change everything. Jesus looked at me, and suddenly the golden light shifted, becoming the dry, rocky hills of Galilee I'd walked a dozen times. He pointed to a single fig tree, its branches gray and dormant. "Learn the lesson, Howard," he said, and as he spoke, the tree began to pulse. I watched, breathless, as it sprouted leaves in a blinding flash, the year 1948, and then bloom with thick green foliage representing 1967, when my people finally returned to the gates of Jerusalem. It wasn't just a plant. It was a living map of Israel's rebirth, transforming right before my eyes into a biological ticking clock that left me trembling. I tried to find my voice, the businessman in me, looking for a logical explanation, but the sheer weight of his presence made my skepticism feel like a discarded rag. I asked him what it meant for those of us still breathing back in St. Louis, and he looked at me with a gravity that shook my soul. "Howard, the generation that saw the sprout will not pass until all is fulfilled," he declared, echoing the ancient words found in Matthew 24. I realized then that my own life wasn't just a series of years, but a witness to the final minutes of a divine appointment that the entire world is now desperately trying to ignore. Before I could even process the timeline, the scene shifted again, and I was looking down from a height that would have made me dizzy if I were still in my body. I saw the great Euphrates River, a waterway I knew from history as the cradle of civilization, but it wasn't a rushing torrent anymore. It was a pathetic trickle of mud and silt. I saw massive concrete structures, huge dams in Turkey, literally choking the life out of the water. Jesus looked at that dry riverbed and told me that while men think they are building for power and irrigation, they are actually paving a highway for the kings of the East. The physical drying of that river wasn't just a geographical change, it was a tactical signal for the final gathering of nations. Jesus explained that the spiritual veil over the world is thinning, and these geopolitical movements are the literal fulfillment of Revelation 16. He showed me that what we see on the news as water management or regional tension is actually the hand of God clearing the path for the end of this age. He told me to tell you that when the water stops, the path is open, and there is no human treaty or military strategy that can delay the arrival of what is coming next. As a man who spent 80 years trusting in bank accounts and textile contracts, seeing the literal blueprints of the end times stripped away every bit of my old security, I stood there on that dry riverbed, realizing that the world I left behind was operating on a clock it didn't even know existed. But even that shocking revelation of the river was just the beginning of the journey he had planned for me. Jesus leaned closer, the light around him intensifying until it felt like a physical pressure against my chest, and whispered that what he was about to show me next was the thing that would truly make me fall to my knees. Standing on that dry riverbed, I thought the shocks were over, but the light pulsed again, and I was suddenly in a modern Jerusalem street. I recognized the stone and the bustle, but something was different. Two men in rough sackcloth stood near the western wall, their voices shaking the pavement like thunder. They weren't just preaching, they were commanding the elements. I watched the sky snap shut at their word, and water turn the color of rust. But the real shock wasn't their power, it was what was in the hands of the crowds. Thousands were holding up smartphones, their screens glowing as they broadcasted these two prophets to the entire world in real time, satellite uplinks catching every single word. I turned to Jesus, my mind racing to understand how ancient prophecy could meet fiber optic cables. I asked how the whole earth could see two men lying in a street for days, a feat that seemed impossible when the scrolls were written. He looked at me with a knowing smile and said, "Howard, the world once wondered how everyone would see my witnesses at once. Now the technology exists for the whole earth to celebrate their death and tremble at their resurrection in a single second." He showed me that our devices are the final tools for Revelation 11. The stage is set, the cameras are ready, and the global audience is just waiting for the curtain to rise. The scene shifted, and a massive, glowing veil seemed to descend over the synagogues I had spent my life leading. Jesus looked at it with a sadness that turned into fierce hope. He explained that a partial hardening had come upon my people, but it wasn't a rejection, it was a divine pause. He showed me a numerical value, a specific fullness of non-Jews that must enter the kingdom first. I saw names being added to a celestial list from every corner of the globe. He told me with a gravity that made the air vibrate, "The count is almost complete, Howard. When the last one enters, the veil will be torn, and all Israel will finally recognize me." The countdown is about a specific number of souls. Then came the moment that shattered whatever was left of my old self. Jesus took me to the very dust of the land, the soil of Israel that I had walked many times. He showed me the maps, the UN resolutions, and the treaties signed in villas by men who thought they owned the earth. Then he stepped onto the soil, and it glowed with an eternal white-hot intensity. He looked me in the eyes, his voice sounding like the roar of the ocean, and declared that no human decree can cancel what he has written in his own blood. "I do not take back what I have signed," he said. "The covenant with Abraham is an eternal possession." I fell to my knees, burying my face in that glowing dust, because the weight of his words was more than my spirit could carry. I tried to ask about the wars and the threats at the borders, but he just placed his scarred hand on my head. I felt a surge of peace that defied every news report I'd ever read. He leaned down and whispered, "If the sun and moon cannot be abolished from the sky, Howard, then neither can Israel be removed from my hand." I understood then that my people's survival isn't a political miracle, it's a legal certainty signed in the heavens. Every treaty signed by men is just paper compared to the blood of the Messiah. The visions began to fade back into that liquid gold light, and Jesus stood before me one last time with an expression of urgent love. He spoke a final truth about the world I was about to re-enter, a summary that made everything clear. "Tell them the fig tree is heavy with fruit, Howard. Tell them the river is dry and the count is nearly full. I'm coming for my own, and the time for preparation is not tomorrow, but now." I felt a sudden, massive pull, a weight of lead beginning to settle back onto my soul. He told me it was time to go back and deliver the mandate. I realized my mission was just beginning. Jesus placed his scarred hand on my shoulder, the light intensifying. "Go back, Howard," he said, his voice a command wrapped in tenderness. "Tell them the fig tree is heavy with fruit. Tell them the river's dry. Tell them I am coming." I shook my head, refusing to leave that peace. He whispered, "They need to hear it from someone who didn't want to believe." Suddenly I was slammed back into my body like a suit of lead. The rib-cracking agony and biting cold hit me at once. I gasped a ragged breath that shocked the room, and I heard Bernie scream, "He's back! My God, Howard is back!" I'm telling you this because I was a man who lived by facts, and the facts are undeniable. The fig tree has sprouted, and my generation holds the stopwatch for the final hour. The Euphrates is becoming a road of dust, while the technology for the whole world to watch the witnesses is already in your pocket. The count for the Gentiles is reaching its limit, and the veil is about to be torn from my people forever. I didn't ask for this mission, but the urgency I feel is like a fire in my marrow. We are standing at the threshold of a divine appointment that cannot be delayed by any human treaty. If you feel a heavy restlessness in your soul, or if the news makes you want to hide, listen to me. Jesus didn't show me these things to cause terror, but to offer the only anchor that holds in a storm. For those who are confused or feel God has forgotten your family, remember the soil of Israel I saw glowing with his promise. His covenant is signed in blood, and it is irrevocable. He told me the time for maybe tomorrow is over. Look up, set your house in order, and recognize that the King is at the very gates. You were chosen to be alive now to decide where you stand. I have delivered the mandate Jesus gave me, and now the choice belongs to you. If this testimony has shaken you, please subscribe and turn on the notifications. Like this video to help reach others, and share it with someone struggling with fear. I want to hear from you in the comments. What sign today makes you feel the King is near? Remember the fig tree. The harvest is truly here. This message reached you for a reason. Stay ready. Shalom.